Good morning and welcome to the latest Family Business Insight here at Family Business United. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by CEO of Ridgeview Winery, Tamara Roberts. So without further ado, we will run to time as always and look forward to some insightful conversation with Tamara about her business. If you have any questions, please do use the chat function and we will endeavour to cover as many of those in the time allotted as we can. So good morning, Tamara.
Morning.
Beautiful day in Sussex and a beautiful day presumably to work on a vineyard.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been the weather's been super kind to us at the moment, which is a relief, I think, for a vineyard owner, but also for anyone who's suffering in the lockdown situation we're in at the moment. So yeah, it's great.
No, definitely. So for those of you that don't know, you are the CEO of Ridgeview Vineyard in Sussex. Do you want to tell me a little bit about the journey and actually what prompted someone to create a vineyard in Britain initially to produce wines like you do?
Yeah, so we started back in 1995 planting the first vines at the vineyard. You can see a nice picture of them behind me, it was actually my parents who started it. It was a second career for them. They were previously in the IT industry and had built a business up through that in the 80s, and then moved suddenly into wine in the 90s. So my brother and I came into the business gradually during the 90s and early 2000s, and started off into there. So it was a classic, I think, timing and side where, you know, the wine industry back in the 90s was, particularly the English wine industry, wasn't particularly well regarded. There was one other producer, I think, who did what we did, which was focused just on sparkling wines and varietals for that, which are the Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. And that was Nye Timber, owned by an American couple back then. And and it was really just the beginning of something quite, something quite astonishing, really, in terms of the sparkling wine production in the UK, which I think has grown hugely over that period, and the amount of investment that's come into it. So it was the very beginning of an industry, really, which was really exciting to be part of.
And a big decision, I guess, for your parents. I mean, going from IT to a vineyard in Britain, entrepreneurial, but some might say foolhardy.
Yeah, and I think most of the people they asked for finance for did think they were completely crazy. So I think they wouldn't have been able to do it without their own funding, really, to set it up. So, you know, pretty much all of what they made from their previous business was invested into Ridgeview to set it up at the beginning. And really, not only was it wine, and obviously we had no background in the industry at all, but also wine in England just wasn't a thing, and wasn't understood at all, really, and sparkling wines particularly, because those had never really been grown or manufactured in the UK at all. So it was a huge learning curve for everyone, and we had to bring people along on the journey with us, which was quite interesting.
And where did the passion for wine of your parents come from?
Consumption, of course. I think, you know, there was a great love. Both my parents really loved champagne, actually, and the region. So spent quite a lot of time with their previous business. They would use trips to Champagne as kind of a sales incentive, as it were, for the sales guys. And if people made their targets, etc., then there would be a big trip over to Champagne with tastings and various other things. And so there was a real affinity with the region, and I think even I just remember my dad saying, "Well, the weather's pretty atrocious over there. I can't see why we can't do what we, similar sort of thing." So, and it does come down to that. Winemaking is all about soil and climate, and that's what it is. And that enables you to grow grapes in a certain style in a certain way. So you can't just grow what you want. You have to abide by the rules, as it were, that the climate dictates to you.
And is the geography then in Sussex where you're based? So you're based in East Sussex in Ditchling. Is that very similar to the Champagne region in terms of soil structure and composition and geology?
Yeah, so you know, the South Downs being that chalk seam that used to run under it, still does go under the Channel, but we used to all be joined up with the northern area of France, so, and the Paris Basin. So we are, you know, in terms of the influence of that is very significant, particularly in the south of England, as it is over in the Champagne region there. But likewise, there's a variety of soil types around the south of England too. Like there would be in Champagne, because Champagne's a huge region too. So you've got you've got a huge difference, which I think is great, because wherever you grow your grapes, the geology does influence some of the flavours in those. So you get a really lovely. We have plantings now all over the south, including Sussex, Kent, over in Essex, Suffolk. So we have a nice mix of different soil varieties on which the grapes are being grown, which is great for the winemaking side of things later in the process.
So that's, for me, it's really interesting. It's a science in a way, isn't it? It's a real craft and a science in what you do. So your parents set the seeds and started, and it's grown significantly since those first days. So you're 25 years old this year, celebrating a silver anniversary, which is fantastic.
It's not, but not in COVID lockdown. It's not fun celebrating anything this year, really, is it?
No, but I guess we have to make the most of it. And if we have to, let's raise a glass of sparkling wine to celebrate.
Exactly.
Share a little bit in terms of the other family members, because there's quite a lot of you involved in the business as a second generation, and explain to me some of your first memories of life in that family business growing up.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I've always been involved wherever I could in the business prior to Ridgeview too. So I used to be a cleaner. I used to work in in various departments on my holidays. So I've always had an involvement in the businesses that the business that my parents have run, and they've always been very supportive of that, which I think has been super helpful for me running a business now, actually. So I think I think the nice thing, or I don't think they certainly didn't expect us to come on board. It was just a kind of a gradual process. My brother came in first. He'd finished a degree in boat building, so we were really keen sailors as well. So he then came back and started to get involved at planting, and then continued through the viticulture and winemaking side, learning very much on site with some courses in between and various other things, and a trip over to Australia to get some experience too. So and that's where he met his wife in Brown Brothers, actually, the wineries over there, and brought Mardi back. And she now she's on the marketing side of the business, the communication side, and then I joined when we decided to expand the business in the early 2000s. I'm sort of more finance side, qualification wise, and so I came in general management and then moved into the CEO role in 2014. So we've all kind of got my brother's quite creative. He really loves the winemaking side of things. He's got a great palate. And that just, so we all have quite, we're not sort of competitive in terms of the roles that we've got. We all seem to have just fitted in quite nicely, which I know for some family business that doesn't happen. So I think maybe we've been slightly lucky there too.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Obviously, I've visited you 3 or 4 times now, and it's a fantastic place to visit. But what I love is when you walk into the winery itself, you walk up the stairs, you've got all the photos and the history, and there's a photo of your father with a dog at the bottom of the stairs in the vineyard. And I think that you've really embraced the familyness in terms of your brand and the way you portray who you are.
Yeah, it's really important. Actually, just before I forget, but my husband also works for us, because I didn't mention him. So so it really is very much still, everyone's on board, and there are, strange, running family businesses is a very different dynamic, I think, to running, businesses that aren't so family orientated. But I think there are some really good strengths to that too.
And talk us through the journey. So when it was first planted, I'm assuming, and I'm not a winemaker, so I know a little bit, but clearly not as much as you do. From the moment you planted those first vines to the first bottles of wine being made, that was quite a long investment period, wasn't it, in terms of growth? So your first production would have been in.
So we started slightly earlier by so our plantings for 95. The first vintage would be 97.
Okay.
And then so it's really a 6-year period. So if you plant a vine from a new vine, you will get in year 1. In year 3, you'll get a quarter of a vintage, year 4. So year 6, you're up to full vintage, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then each time that you think of a vintage each year, then you've probably got to add 2, maybe 3 years on top for the production of the wine process. So you tend to work in 6-year cycles in terms of growth. So
Okay.
from new plantings to that wine being properly available, you know, on the market, then you're looking at 6 years really in a cycle of that. So yeah, it is a long period, and actually quite, I do take, my parents were very, very brave, because there wasn't, they had no idea, there was some talk of the wines coming out from Nye Timber and those sorts of things, but there wasn't really any guarantee that what we were going to produce was going to be at the standards that we wanted it to be, because it's not inexpensive to make and grow grapes over here, the yields over here, and that's what drives the price point, which people often ask me. It's like, well, why is it rising? Well, we get really small yields, but it costs us the same to get those yields as it would for another vineyard in a warmer climate or somewhere else to get bigger yields. So the cost of production over here is extraordinarily high, but it's necessary to be that high because the climate dictates what we can make. So we couldn't make this style of wine in a warmer climate. So there are lots of factors at play that drive the costs into the business. So and also that whole kind of a 3-year winemaking process is costly, and that is reflected as we go through. So yeah. It's quite a. I've just completely forgotten the question. Isn't that interesting?
Well, no. It's the heat. It's down to the weather. In terms of volumes and things, just explain. Obviously, pre the situation, pre-pandemic, you were up to the biggest yields I think you've ever produced. You've spent a lot of time investing in the new facilities, the new offices, and investing in new vines. So,
yeah.
give us an idea of the scale of production we're looking at the moment.
So currently we're seeing about 500,000 bottles go through the winery on a year-by-year basis, and I think we've got some new growers coming on in the next. So we tend to work rather than owning all the land and that side of things, and having estate. We have some estate fruit, which you can see a picture of behind me, but we tend to work with growers, usually farmers who are diversifying part of their land that's suitable, because not by a long shot, not all land is suitable for viticulture. So we tend to work with them, and that gives us the ability to spread some of our growing risk in terms of climate conditions and geology around the southeast. So we've grown our business in that way. So we've got some new growers, I think some mainly in Kent actually, that we've worked with now, coming in sort of the first vintages from next year onwards. So I think we'll start to push up to 650, maybe 700,000 bottles in the next few years. Obviously, it'll take longer for those to come through onto the market. So yeah, it is. Certainly the growth is on its way, which is really exciting.
And also, I mean, you use the family brand in terms of marketing, and you've got an export market. So you've really succeeded in putting English sparkling wine on the map. And I guess for those that don't know, your wine is served at state banquets at Buckingham Palace. It's been served at number 10, and it's award winning. So it's really pushing the boundaries of English sparkling wine on a global platform.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the importance of obviously governmental support, and in terms of getting into the banquets and also that side of things are really important. But actually, competitions are super important for medals and being thought of alongside perhaps in a global wine market rather than a domestic wine market. I think that's really important. We've won some super big awards. In 2018, we've been first as an English wine producer to do stuff as well. I think, and we were first English wine producer to win the winemaker of the year at the International Wine and Spirits competition in 2018, which is the top award of that year's competition. So doing things like that and just constantly pushing the boundaries of what English wine had been able to do in the past has been really critical for growth of export, because people take you a bit more seriously and start to get a bit more interested, start to think about the category a bit more. But likewise, I think it's important to have a number of producers doing that, because then you have got a category, and we're not just a one-off niche producer that's doing something amazing. Actually, England as a whole is being able to do it consistently.
No, that's true. And I know close by you and another FBU member, Bolney, is not far away, Bolney Wine Estate.
No.
And again, they're producing award-winning wine. So it's obviously a great product in the region. It's got the right soil and the right people running it. And really pushing the British brand, which I think is really powerful and a great thing to do. So your business then is the mix of your business. You've got the export piece, and then you've got the retail piece. I guess I'd call it retail, where you sell to some of the major supermarkets.
Yeah,
and then
so
the food service piece.
Yeah, so we've got in the technical terms of the jargon of the trade, as we all have, we have the off trade, which is those supermarkets, that side of things, in the trade side of the business. Yep. The on trade, hospitality, which is obviously taking a massive hit at the moment. But we also do have our own what I call direct retail, so people coming to visitors buying wine directly from us through the website, or coming and actually seeing us there. As well. So we've the tourism aspect of our business is obviously taking a hit at the moment too. So we can't do tours and various other things right now. So yeah, it's quite and then we have the export too. So yeah, it's quite broad in terms of the customer base that we deal with on a day. So we've got we've got direct to consumer marketing, off trade marketing, and various other things to consider too. So, but that's a good thing in situations like this, because we're not reliant on just one sector, which has been a bit of a lifesaver.
So the diversification's really helped you, hasn't it? I saw a quote from you just recently saying, actually, the world has changed forever, and the world won't be quite the same ever again.
No.
What are your thoughts in terms of, this isn't a coronavirus chat, but in terms of the challenges? It's obviously been a big challenge for you. What have been the implications for you and your business, and then what are you doing and what are you looking for? What's your prognosis? What are your thoughts for the future?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to know how people will come out of this quite significant change to lifestyle that everyone's had to endeavour for, and being forced upon us for a few months. I think the landscape's going to change quite dramatically. I can't see a scenario where we just go from where we are now to, in a couple of months, back to where we were back in February, March. I just can't see that happening. So I think we've got a very long tail to this, which will take, the recovery's not, hopefully the economic recovery will, won't be like a long, deep recession. I mean, I'm not an expert in economics, so I can tell you that, but it would be not, but I do think particularly around, the hospitality side of what we've been used to in the past, I think that's going to look very, very different. And at the moment, I'm not sure who's going to survive. I think there's been quite a few, casualties along the way, and what happens when the furlough scheme ends in October as well, and which I think is propping quite a few businesses up with, and avoiding perhaps more difficult decisions and challenging decisions down the road. So, and also our behaviours as consumers, we're now much more used to being at home. We're more casual. We've adapted, as we would do, and we should do, to what surrounds us. And will we want to go back to 100% back to where we were? I think, the travel industry certainly is going to struggle, I think. And, looking at some of the surveys I've seen with business travel and everything else, people aren't quite as keen. People are thinking, I think they're thinking a little bit more about what's going on around them, the environment and those sides of things. So I think there is some, some changes coming our way, but it's really difficult to predict when and exactly which ones are going to be prevalent.
I think I agree with you. And talking to lots of other family business owners around the UK at the moment, they're having similar conversations around the hospital, especially around the hospitality sector. When will you go out for dinner? When will you want to go and have dinner in a crowded restaurant again? And all those types of scenarios, which I guess impact you on a predictive basis in terms of what you're going. In terms of shelf life, does your sparkling wine have a shelf life? And does it get better with age? And this is my ignorance when it comes to wine. And then the question that's come in, which is kind of related in a way, is that there's a lot of conversation around the use of the word champagne and sparkling wine. And obviously, unless you're from Champagne, you can't call it champagne. Has the industry settled on, and the question has come in, has the industry really settled on a brand name that covers the whole category? And does sparkling wine do your brand or your product, does it do it justice?
Okay, let's start with the last part of that about brand names, or a generic brand name. Now, look, there's a lot of, we've had dialogue on this now for, I suppose, most of the time we've been involved, so 20 years in terms of trying to come up with a name. And I think some of the biggest resistance we have for that from producers, particularly those who are early brands, so the ones who've really developed their brands in the last 10, 15 years, and invested an awful lot in their own individual brands. There's a lot of resistance to that, because you can have what we call the Prosecco syndrome, where people know that more than they do an individual producer, and therefore you are always judged by the worst case of whoever's drunk a bottle of Prosecco. You're all judged and lumped into the same, and your price points, and it's really hard to differentiate yourself if you're just labelled as, oh, this is Prosecco. And people we naturally will look for the cheapest of a range, potentially, if we're and so it will become very price focused, which is not really what champagne does at all. In fact, champagne has got a name, but really the brands are the strongest part of that. People will buy into a brand. There'll be a Moet fan or a Krug fan. There is, the brand strength there is significant. The other thing is the champagne is actually the name of the region that they grow in. So it's just a lovely name that's actually, fortunately, the area in which they're actually growing their stuff. And we don't have that, or that history from that the French have for that. We just don't have that. So to try and suddenly just recreate a name that's meaningful for people is really, really tricky. So at the moment, I think there isn't a huge interest in it from the key players in the industry. There's been an awful lot of thoughts around it, but I think at the moment everyone thinks our own individual brands, the strength of those is the critical thing. And also there's an awful lot of innovation as well in the industry as well. We don't want to stifle that either, and I think we're just a little bit we're still tiny, really, and maybe a little young, and if I'm honest, English sparkling wine does actually tell you what it is. It's not exactly misleading.
No, it's not. And actually, to be fair, your English sparkling wine is delicious. So I think there's an element, as you say, it's about the brand and building the brand awareness and the product brand awareness, and actually developing your customer base, which I know you do really, really well. You've invested a lot over the years in terms of the business. What are the most recent things that you're doing to really put you in the position to grow when we get back to a more normal scenario?
Yeah, so we opened another production facility last year, our aptly named Winery 3. So it's our building that we built, and so that's enabled us to have the facilities growth that we needed to cater for stuff. It's never enough. We have to build again and extend, but we did build that into the planning this time, which is great. Then on top of that, I think, to be fair, our focus over the next 18 months will be brand awareness and marketing. Really, marketing. We're going to be marketing focused for the next few months. Because it's really tricky, and hopefully that will stand us in a good position when things start to reopen, or events that people are much more aware of us coming out of this. So we're not of the opinion to batten down the hatches and not spend at this stage, but we've had to relook at how we were going to spend that money. So we're just doing that process at the moment, because it's going to be slightly changed around that. So yeah, still going full steam ahead on there. We've got a few building projects and various other bits going on as well, and looking more I suppose internally focused in terms of values and various other bits and pieces. So just going through that next growth phase of a business as you would.
It's interesting talking to you, because this is a third of our Insight series. We spoke to Anne-Marie Kearney at the Victor Pizza Company up in Glasgow, and then Jake Carrara in Leicester, who make delicious products based on their mum's recipes, which is a lovely business too. And all three of you have continued the trend of saying, actually, now's the time to actually invest, but not to invest to kind of ad hoc projects, but actually to really invest in the future, and now's a really good time to be investing in the right marketing and branding. So there's a common theme coming out. I think it's not just lockdown, don't spend a penny. It's really about investing in the future of your businesses, which is great to hear, that there's still that desire to drive it forward, rather than just kind of like wait for things to happen.
Yeah, and I think we have to accept there's a lot of people, but in terms of the people are more online more and listening more. You've got that hasn't changed, so you've still got everyone's attention. It's just making sure that you don't lose out to competitors or other sectors, etc. So it's just keeping it. I think it's really, really important.
The other thing that's come through really strongly in the whole pandemic is the sense of community around the country, be it your local community coming together to do food, all sorts of food parcels and everything else. I know that community at Bolney next door to you, and community at Ridgeview, there seems to be a really strong bond between community and growing type bit, so you're growing in the local community, your staff are local, that whole community thing really comes through in your type of businesses.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Is there a reason, or is it just that's the way you are and that's what you do, or is it more focused?
I think it is. I mean, I think we're physically, I think oddly for wine consumption, or what, we're here, so we're physically here. We're real. You can come see us. You can be engaged with, all the family and various. So there is that sense of us being, physically here, rather than overseas somewhere and you just get a bottle at the end of the, through a wholesaler and stuff like that. So I think that side of it, in terms of the local community, does give us the ability to be much more engaged with them, and in terms of what we do. And also, people are, we can work with, and I think as we touched, we've got direct business, you work with local restaurants and hotels and all that. So we've got quite a lot of, fingers in lots of different pies locally as well. And I live locally, so I know all the local sports clubs and the communities around there. So we do have that built-in engagement, because we're real people and we're there, and so people can engage with us a lot better, and we can engage back with them. So we've been doing a lot more with local clubs that we're involved with, and offers and support. And then, we also now, every sale that we make direct through our website, I think we're donating to charity at the moment, Hospitality in Action, to support industries that aren't faring quite as, as well, or suffering a lot more than we are right now. And I think that's something actually that, now we've done it, we probably won't stop. And we'll continue that moving forward. It's actually, well, why not? We can give back. And I think that's been quite, a good journey to go on.
And your staff obviously love what you do. I've been to see you and I've met them, and they're full of positivity for the product and the brand. And that kind of essence of being part of that broader family is really important. I know it is to you and to the broader team. Going forward, next generation, long-term plans. I know the next generation is still quite young, but are they living the dream with you at the moment? Is there plans to bring them on board? What's the long-term view for them?
Yeah, 15 and 13-year-old. I really don't know what their dreams are right now, but they, I mean, at the moment, oddly, that because they're here at the moment and at home a lot, they're actually getting quite involved in various bits that we're doing around. So they're helping out, watering some of we've got a lot of, we like to make the place look nice, so we've got lots of plants and various other things. So they do a lot of that in the evenings at the moment. So they do get involved, and if we had the hospitality function open over here, then they would be, definitely they get involved in those areas, pop-up dinners and various other things. So yeah, they do. They enjoy getting involved in the event side and the tourism side. I think, like most, like a lot of, family businesses, there is quite a gap between, the generations now. That gap's quite large. So you can't really, you do need to have an interim in between perhaps the two. So, and also I think that's quite healthy. For me, I think I much prefer that if the kids come in, my brothers come into the business, that they're not working directly for a relative. That I think is quite, that there is there's a level of independence and expectation there that they have to live up to. So but there's no pressure on that at all. And that's if it happens, it happens.
So what's your dream? What do you see happening in the next 5 years? What would you love to, sitting here in 5 years' time, looking back, saying, I wanted that to happen and it hasn't? What are your goals? What do you want to happen?
I think one of our key goals is really to develop the hospitality and tourism side of the business on site. That's kind of been, we've been building up to that. We've got some really great plans in place once we feel it's the right time to do it. I mean, we were hoping to maybe next year to start some of it, and I think we probably still will. But again, we just have to keep an eye on how we're, what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do, and do the investment at a timely part of, when it's worth doing, as it were. But definitely in 5 years' time, I'd like to see us, certainly having much more, events on site, more offering from the site, more direct, that consumer engagement, I think, is really important to us, and tourism. I think, we've done very little work as an industry, and I think we should be doing more is working with some of the sort of the more tourist boards and bodies to really get us as a destination on the map, for inbound and for domestic tourism too. And I think there may be need for some accommodation or those sorts of things. I think there's a lot of interesting developments there. On the other side as well, it would be nice to see more export markets developed, more volume going out through the export markets too, but never forgetting that there's still quite a lot of demand domestically to fulfill. So, I think in our life, or in the life of the winery, 5 years actually isn't that long. I wouldn't probably, if I planted some some vines today, it's they still wouldn't be in 5 years. That wouldn't have come onto the market yet. So, yeah, it's I think there's a lot of what we think about is very achievable in those 5 years, which is great.
It's interesting, a comment's just come in actually. That I love to visit family businesses across the country, and quite a lot of them have to, coincidentally, food and drink related. No correlation apart from I love food and drink anyway. And someone's just suggested actually we should start promoting the Sussex wine route like they do in the wine route in South Africa, and make it more of a destinational thing. So there's obviously lots of opportunity for you. Two final questions really from me. One is, what do you see as the biggest challenge going forward?
I think at the moment, I've changed a little bit because I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that to me is an immediate challenge. Is actually to know. Usually, I've got it all mapped out for the next 3 years, but I'm actually struggling now for the next 6 to 12 months to know where we, that's more of my head scratching time at the moment. Is like, okay, so when do we think, or what, So that to me, this whole thing has sort of thrown the next year a little bit into an unknown area for me at the moment. So longer term, I feel fairly confident in where we are. But that to me is one of the challenges, and I guess again, I mean, it's kind of around, I suppose, because it's so on my mind at the moment, is what the landscape's going to look like. And how do we fit into that landscape post when we're coming back into this after this next year?
Yeah.
Is that, do we need to look and change our business model slightly domestically, or just that kind of things? It's just what will we need to be tweaking moving forward? I mean, we have our business is inherently risky because we're dependent on weather or agricultural. So I'll put that to one side. That doesn't change. That just carries on throughout. But these are the added things that that area of certainty around some of our customer base and direction is, and globally, what the fallout from this may be as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you see there being any positives in the current pandemic in terms of timing, in terms of things have slowed down a little bit? Some business owners are saying actually we've had time to take a little bit more reflection and take a perspective. Do you see that as a positive, or that's just an inconvenience? Or
no, I mean, I think from our perspective, we've found, a lot of us would probably sit down and say actually it's been quite nice to actually have a breath and sit and think about things. And I do think certainly April and May were a lot around that, a lot of reflecting, a lot of taking a step back and actually just calming everything down a little bit, because we were full steam ahead at that point and had loads and loads of things, all things in the air as you do. So it's actually been quite nice to have some of that just taken away from you, so you can actually now and refocus, I think, on some of the key things. And I just start to see that now that we've kind of got a good plan moving forward, but we're still not kind of trying to. And I think because we're in the drinks industry as well, a lot of what we do is out in I say antisocial hours, but evenings, weekends, and entertaining and hospitality. So you're full on all the time. You've got your work job during the day, you've got your evening stuff. So it has been quite nice to have a little rest from that for the last few months.
Yeah, and I guess though the nature of your business is the vines still keep growing and still need to be tended, and the candles still need to go out to stop the frost. So actually, the business has to continue because you're already in the journey, weren't you, when it started? So yeah,
that's quite refreshing, really, because you just know, right? Okay, well the vines, they're there. We carry on. So we haven't actually had any stop in anything. We've just, in terms of the production side of the business, that's just had to continue.
Yeah. My last question, really, for you, Tamara, is what's your proudest achievement? So 25 years from the day your parents sort of planted that first vine, which is a massive stake in the ground and a big risk, as you've said in your own words, a big risk and a step they took. And it's been really successful, award-winning business. It's grown to a significant volume of production. It's being served by the Queen at Buckingham Palace. It doesn't get much better than that. So of all of the successes that you've had, what has been your proudest achievement?
I think from personally, it's been sort of the transition after my dad passed away in 2014, and I became sort of fully fledged into the leadership of the business, and my brother alongside me. And I think from my perspective is with wines that he had complete control over, that because he and Dad used to wine make together, and I think that was the winning of the 2018 IWSC Winemaker of the Year was probably my proudest moment, because it was something that the second generation had fully achieved, you know, and created a new, and moved the legacy on, and you know, and I think that was the thing. It was almost like a stake in the ground. It's like, actually, this is our job. This is what we did. I know that, you know, all the building blocks and everything else was put in way before, and we've learned an awful lot from it. But it was just that sense of actually, yeah, no, we can do this. This is fine. We're moving it. We're moving it in the right direction still. And I think that to me was quite significant.
I love the fact that you use the word legacy, because actually a lot of family business owners that I speak to talk about legacies, though something that's going to happen after they're not on the planet anymore. And actually we have a choice in life. We can create our own legacy while we're here. And I think what you've just explained for me is that next generation putting their stamp on the business, getting the recognition for their bit and adding to the journey. And it's a journey that's obviously successful and is going to continue for generations, hopefully. Tamara, your English sparkling wine is amazing. Anyone that hasn't drunk some should order a bottle online today, because it's a real treat. From Family Business Unit, I'd just like to say thank you for your time today. You're great FBU members. We love having you as members, and it's your 25th birthday this year as a business. So it's a bit early in the day to raise a glass, but we'd love to raise a glass to you later on and say congratulations. And thank you for your time. You're an absolute star. It's a pleasure to interview.
Lovely. Thank you.
Take care. Have a nice day.
And you. Bye.
Bye-bye.